And here I present a case study where I work with a project at Care International in Vietnam, where they piloted a agro-climate services and advocate for sustaining and scaling as a last mile. And they have had their project in Điện Biên province in Vietnam for several years. However, like during their project, they were mainly working in the two communes, and their hope is that they can advocate for sustaining and scaling to a broader context. For example, like in a whole Điện Biên district. The decision questions identified was: should the Điện Biên government invest in the scaling of agro-climate service or not? And if yes, then which scaling options? In order to support analyzing the investment decision, first I try to understand what does it mean as agro-climate service. And it shows that agro-climate service is not just a simple intervention, but it's actually the whole value chain, including the generating of the climate and weather forecast, and to translate those forecasts into agricultural advice, and to transfer the forecast and advice to users using different communication channels, and to support the use of the information. And in addition to that, there are some other integral parts of the value chain, including capacity building, gender integration, governance, monitoring, and evaluation. And all these processes and components must be considered in the process to identify the relevant stakeholders. After understanding the concept of climate information service, I started defining stakeholder. However, I did use the definition that I have mentioned before, but in it, I didn't include the non-human stakeholder, but limited only to human stakeholders. In the next step, I use different methods to identify stakeholder, and those methods include, for example, focus group discussion, where I use the tools and the techniques including brainstorming and mind mapping, and I also use a semi-structured interview and with some questionnaire to identify stakeholders. And for the desk review, I use quite a number of sources, including like previous studies, organizational charts, and stakeholders and project reports, advocacy plan. Advocacy plan is often include a lot of useful information relevant to the stakeholders. And I also use a value chain analysis report. Apart from that, I also use a snowball sampling, in which I use the recommendation from the stakeholders that I have contact with, and then they can recommend others. And a little bit like a slightly different approach is use the expert opinion, in which I could ask stakeholder experts and like project manager or network coordinator who are having a lot of useful knowledge about the stakeholders, which could be involved in the decision analysis process. After using those previous methods, I identify stakeholders across the different components of the agro-climate service. And here are the examples of stakeholders mapped at the national and also at the local levels. As you could see that there were quite many stakeholders. Then the question is that what if there are too many stakeholders? Can we engage them all? And my experience is that no, we cannot engage them all at the same time. So we need to use some criteria to see where and when they can engage them. Here is the example how I can identify experts among those stakeholders, and I use those criteria here, and from those I would identify who could be relevant in participating in the decision analysis process. And here is the file where I record the information of the stakeholders, including like their position, their gender, their role, and their expertise experience, and give them on some attribute like experience and availability. I give them there will be a score between 0 and 5. And there will be a group of project involved in the project who would try help to rank this one. But then later on, this information is also updated when we have more information when we can engage more of the stakeholders. And yeah, those attributes are then analyzed. And here is the result of the stakeholder analysis. So for the stakeholders who have a lot of experience but also available to participate, then I would categorize them as a potential core experts. However, there are people who have a lot of experience but they are having very limited time, then I would still consider them as an expert, but they could still be considered as a resource person or resource stakeholders. It means that they will not participate regularly in the decision analysis process, but I would need to arrange sometimes very short meeting with them and to ask some specific questions related to the decision problem that I'm analyzing. Apart from that, I also map out the expertise of the stakeholders to really see how representative they are in the climate information service value chain. And it's also very important to note that it's very difficult to get a perfect group of the stakeholders. But it is important to recognize their representation and being transparent about how and who we can actually engage. Even we cannot have the perfect group, but when we are transparent, it is also important to show our potential bias. And similar to that, then I would also identify the gender. It is not always easy to know, but where possible, then it is important to try to get a balanced group with a mixed gender groups. Here is the result of the stakeholder analysis to identify the experts. In my research with the information on the at the bottom corner on the right, you could see the full paper where I also analyze the stakeholders to see how they can potentially bring this evidence into the climate information planning process in the local government. Thank you very much for listening.